Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
If you want to get your dogs some tasty, delicious, fresh baked pumpkin treats that are great for their digestion, visit beautiesbiscuits.com. We've got turmeric varieties, peanut butter, all natural peanut butter. Parsley helps with stinky dog breath. I actually grow it right in my yard. So this season I am harvesting my parsley.
Yay.
And making fresh dog biscuits for you. And I also have CBD. Great for senior dogs, dogs that are anxious, hip pain, joint pain. Turmeric and CBD is wonderful. I got all the things. Use offer code LIES and save 20% at beautiesbiscuits.com.
Do it.
Because your dogs will love you for it, and so will I.
If you like weird and strange history, then I have the podcast for you. My name is Brenda, and I'm the host of Horrifying History. Are you into the dark side of history? Horrifying History tells you about the side of history that people don't normally talk about. We talk about the tales of haunted places, infamous true crimes, cursed items, and unsolved mysteries, and then we look into the science and documentation to see where does the truth actually lie. Want to get spooky with us? Get your Horrifying History fix by subscribing to Horrifying History, which you can find on any major podcast provider.
Hey there! This is my disclaimer. Beyond the Rainbow is a true crime podcast, and it's not suitable for children. It's a true crime show. I talk about murder. This show also might not be suitable for some adults either. Swearing is my second language. I excel at it. Don't say I didn't warn ya. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow. True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ, and founder of Darkcast Network. Darkcast Network houses some of the very best shows in true crime, conspiracy theories, paranormal, and darkly obscure topics. If you haven't checked us out yet, be sure to. As well, the network has its own podcast called Spotlight on Darkcast, where every week we put a spotlight on a different Darkcast show. If you go to Spotlight on Darkcast on your podcast app, you can binge episodes from the whole network, with more to come. Find me on the socials at Rainbow Crimes just about anywhere, or at Darkcast Network, and on Facebook at Beyond the Rainbow or DCNet, Darkcast Network. The portly, white, middle-aged guy dressed in jeans and a short-sleeved button-down shirt. He also wore cowboy boots as he walked down the Montrose section of Houston. It was nighttime, and the sound of an active nightlife whirled through his ears. Flashing neon lights advertised sex shops, liquor, bars, strip clubs, and tobacco. These businesses were open all night, and they were on both sides of the busy street. The man was here for it, all of it. It was his haven, and it sent a tingly chill into his nether region. He saw a few young boys standing in front of a rundown shop, and he knew the boys were there for money. He had the money, and they had what he wanted. He nodded at the group of boys, and a tall, thin, handsome boy with a small patch of acne on his face and some peach fuzz whiskers walked over to him. "What are you looking for tonight?" the boy asked. "You," said the man. William Gerald List was a married man with 2 children, a son named Ron and a daughter named Debbie. But for William, who went by Bill, even the love of his family couldn't keep him from a secret sickness that burned inside of him. Bill had a hunger for teenage boys. In the late 1950s, he acted upon his urges, and he ended up in an Ohio prison for lewd and lascivious acts with male minors. During his prison stay, Bill was made to seek mental counsel. He told a prison psychiatrist he knew that he was gay since he was 8 years old because he had this penchant for underage boys and the pleasure he found inflicting pain upon them. After countless sessions with the psychiatrist, Bill began to say the right things to make authorities believe he was no longer a threat to society. We might call it good acting. By the time Bill was released from prison and on parole in 1962, his wife had divorced his ass and took the kids. Not having anything to keep him in Ohio, he decided to head to Texas. This is where he wanted to have his proverbial clean slate. He wanted to have a fresh start here. While he was in Texas, he was able to raise enough money to start a business. His new endeavor was to fabricate trailers for 18-wheeler semi-trucks. The trailers weren't average trailers for big rigs, though. They were specially designed to haul equipment for oil drilling rigs. Because this was Texas, baby! And oil was what made people rich from the early 1900s up until sometime around the mid to late 1980s. And that's when the oil industry in Texas took kind of a nosedive. The trailer rig business venture, it proved very lucrative for Bill. After about 15 years building these rigs and building up his business, he was rolling in the money. At that point in his life, he decided he wanted to live in a lavish, beautiful home, a millionaire's home. So in the late 1970s, Bill bought up some prime coastal property on Galveston Bay, 4.5 acres to be exact. And then he proceeded to build himself a 34,000 square foot mansion. I probably could have fit 29 of my houses into this mansion. That's how big it was. Remember I said he wanted to live in a lavish, beautiful home? Well, what Bill built might have been elaborate, but it was fucking ugly. This hideous monstrosity, it was going to be the place that this predator would bring his young sexual prey to devour. The mansion, which was called the Todville Mansion, was constructed of iron, steel, and brick, and he had iron bars put on every single window of this mansion. To me, it looked like a prison. It was not only ugly on the outside, it was ugly on the inside. And very, very ugly things would happen in that mansion. For Bill List, it was a fortress, a place where the uninvited couldn't readily enter to see the evil occurring, a place where the young men inside couldn't easily escape either. Bill was known as a braggart around town and through his business. To top it off, he thought he was pretty hot shit because of his newfound wealth. People around town, they put up with Bill, but no one much liked him. He had a quick temper and he was hard to get along with, very argumentative. His list of friends was pretty much non-existent. So, after Bill's ugly mansion was built, he would drive to the Montrose section of Houston. Montrose is Houston's gayborhood. Some of you warriors might remember my episode on Paul Broussard. This is where Paul Broussard was murdered. In Montrose, no one knew Bill, and they couldn't start rumors about him. Here he would pick up young, gay, homeless boys, teenagers who had turned to sex work to be able to buy food or drugs. For them, it was survival sex. Many of these boys were cast out by their families for being gay. Some of the boys weren't even gay, but they had shitty home lives and ran away. And this is where they ended up. Each weekend, Bill would bring back several boys to his mansion. He'd give them a place to stay for a few days. He'd also give them unlimited drugs, booze, and food. While they were there, they were able to live as a wealthy person would and have free reign of the place when Bill went to work. The boys could swim in the indoor pool, relax in the hot tub, and sleep snug in a real bed. To many of these boys, the mansion was the most beautiful thing they were fortunate to be part of. But what Bill List wanted in return for his kindness, he took from these children. And what he wanted was a dominating, painful sexual experience with the boys. Bill got off on BDSM, and more so, BDSM with teenage boys. The boys Bill picked up were given everything they wanted, except freedom. They were only allowed that when Bill tired of them and he was ready to release them, and then he would drive them back to the Montrose area. By the early 1980s, Bill decided to reconnect with his now adult children. He had heard that his ex-wife and the mother of his kids had passed away many years before, so he decided he'd reach out to Ron and Debbie. He wanted to show them how successful he had become. He called them up and he invited them to leave Ohio and come to Texas. He promised them he would supply them with jobs at his company, and they could all become better acquainted that way. Both Ron and Debbie were open to the idea. And they moved to the Houston-Galveston area. It was now 1983. And after a few months of getting to know their hothead father with his grating personality and his immoral sexual behavior with teenage boys, Ron and Debbie's relationship with Bill was becoming strained again. He was the same asshole they believed him to be 20 years ago. On June 12, 1983, Bill placed a phone call to Ron. He let him know that he had received news that Debbie had been murdered. Debbie was the victim of Texas killer Carla Faye Tucker. You can find the story of Carla Faye Tucker on other podcasts. I know All Crime No Cattle covered her case. They called it the Houston Pickaxe Murders, and it's their episode 55, I believe. But Bill's call to his son, this would be the call that ceased any type of relationship continuing between him and Ron. After his daughter's murder, nothing changed for Bill. He was still a perv in his late 50s, early 60s, raping boys for his pleasure. Bill decided he was going to hire himself a live-in boy, one who could help him keep the ugly mansion clean and cook meals. The boy, whose name is Jeff, was actually a young man of 22 years old, a bit old for Bill List's liking. Bill never tried to have sex with Jeff, but Jeff would come live at the Todville Mansion to do light cleaning and cooking, and in return he'd get a roof over his head. He could have all the drugs, booze, and food he wanted, and he'd have a warm bed to sleep in. Jeff had struggled in his early teens with his sexuality and his home life. He would go back and forth between his parents' home and living on the street. Jeff finally came to terms with his truth when he was 16. Between that time and living at the Todville Mansion, Jeff had been incarcerated for auto theft, and he had also spent time in a mental facility. When he was released, a friend of his had told him about Bill List. Bill was getting quite the reputation on Montrose Boulevard. He was known as the old rich white dude. He'll take care of you for a while, but he liked kinky sex in return. So be prepared to put out and do some painful shit if you go with them. Jeff wasn't the only young man that Bill got to stay longer around the house and help out. Bill picked up a 16-year-old named Joey. He offered Joey a place to live and $100 a week to help with cleaning. While Joey was staying at the mansion, him and Jeff started to have feelings for one another, and soon Joey was staying in Jeff's room with them. Jeff made Bill promise he was never to have sex with Joey, because officially, Jeff and Joey were boyfriends. Bill said fine, but we kinda know that Bill wasn't gonna let his worker tell him how to run his house. Shortly after acquiring his new helpers, Bill took another trip to the Montrose area of Houston. It was September of 1984. I'm thinking that younger boys might have been scarce because Bill ended up bringing back two 19-year-olds, Tim and Smiley. Smiley, whose real name was Elbert Irvin Homan. Smiley earned his nickname from his incredible dimples. But Smiley had been through a lot in his short 19 years of life. Smiley was cocky, confident, and he suffered from a bad drug addiction. His mother was in an arranged marriage when she was 13, and she had him shortly after that. It seems she was in and out of marriages with hostile stepfathers for Smiley. And at the age of 15, Smiley was ran over by a car on the freeway. He was helping an accident victim out of their car when another car was barreling through and struck him. The doctors at the hospital told Smiley's mom to say her goodbyes. They didn't think he was going to live. But always a scrappy little fighter, that's what Smiley was, and he survived. When he got out of the hospital, he had a pretty bad limp due to the accident. And after the accident, his normally easygoing demeanor, it changed. He was angsty and he got into trouble a lot more at school. He was getting teased by the other kids because of his limp. He also hated dealing with his mother and her array of shitty husbands. So, Smiley did what he felt like he had to do, and he ran away from home. He lived with an uncle for a while, and then he lived with his girlfriend. And when neither of those things worked out, he lived in a teen shelter. But he became so hopped up on drugs and alcohol, he wasn't allowed to go back. Eventually, Smiley took to the streets of Houston, the Montrose section. This was Smiley's life until the evening Bill List picked him up and took him home to the Todville Mansion. When Smiley saw Bill's mansion, he didn't see any ugliness whatsoever. He saw, well, it was a fairy tale dream come true for him, at least initially. But I have to say the thought of having sex with Bill List disgusted Smiley to the core, and he knew that there was no way in hell he'd ever let Bill touch him, or would he touch Bill. When Bill would talk dirty to him, Smiley would just smile with his big old dimples and nod. It had now been a couple of days that the four young men of Jeff, Joey, Tim, and Smiley had lived in the Todville Mansion. Bill went to work, but he left a chore list for the boys to complete while he was away. Boys being, well, boys and not adept in cleaning, didn't do much that was on that list. And when Bill came home from work, he was pissed. In efforts to intimidate his house guests, Bill grabbed a shotgun and he held it in the crook of his arm. He held it throughout the mansion as he walked through and looked at the areas that were supposed to be cleaned. Bill yelled and called the boys all sorts of names. And that night, Bill pulled Joey and Tim into his room and he raped them both. The next day, Bill left for work. He again left the boys a list of chores, and he was adamant that they needed to get the chores done or they would be kicked out. The four houseboys began to discuss what had happened the night prior, and Joey disclosed that he and Tim were raped. Jeff was livid. Bill had promised him that Joey was off limits. All four of the young men were absolutely disgusted, and they were sick of Bill's twisted, painful sexual urges. Together they devised a plan, and they still had a whole day ahead of them before Bill would return home, so they binged on heroin. Smiley went to his room to sleep it off, and the other 3 boys, they laid around. But after they came down from some of their high, they decided to trash the place. They pulled food from the refrigerator and smeared it all over the walls. They took knives and they ripped open cushions from the couches. They broke chandeliers and light fixtures. They knocked a huge houseplant over and they smashed it through a wall. They tipped over and broke furniture and lamps, and they threw plants and lawn furniture into the swimming pool. They put laundry detergent into the jacuzzi, causing it to foam over. When Smiley awoke, he saw what the other 3 guys had done to the house, and it made him sad, because Smiley had truly loved this mansion. But not one to be left out, Smiley grabbed a marker, and he wrote what would essentially become his confession on one of the walls. Bill List is a very sick man. He is going to die. Smiley, 1984. Smiley then went looking through Bill's things, and he found the shotgun that Bill had used the evening before to try to intimidate them. Smiley grabbed the gun and a box of bullets. He loaded it, and he held on to it. The boys were looking for more things to destroy when they heard Bill's car pull into the driveway. When Bill walked into the mansion, one of the boys shouted, "Hi, Bill!" With a look of anger and utter confusion, Bill took the first step up the stairs towards the boys, and then the second, and as his foot hit the second step, boom! Smiley fired the shotgun at Bill's head. Bill went down. Smiley ran down the steps, and he was standing over Bill, watching the blood ooze from his head. At that moment, Smiley lowered his jeans, and he began to piss all over Bill's body. It took the houseboys less than 10 minutes to grab whatever they wanted from the Todville Mansion, and then they drove away in Bill's car. Not one of the boys had any regrets. Tim was frightened, though, and he wanted to go back to his home in Illinois. That's where he was from. With cash from Bill's wallet, the boys bought him a plane ticket home, and they sent him on his way. The other 3 boys had a key to Bill's work, and they headed there and stole Bill's business checkbook. That night, the 3 ate at a Denny's, and they slept in a room together at a Holiday Inn. The next day, they cashed some of those business checks. The boys had tried to score some more cash by selling some of the heroin, but the deal had gone bad, so they lost $200. It still didn't deter them from a shopping spree. Smiley bought himself a business suit, and Joey got himself a new pair of leather pants. When Smiley tried to cash one of the last checks at a convenience store, an off-duty deputy happened to be working there part-time. He got on the phone to make sure that the check would clear, and he was told that Bill List was dead. The check was no good. And that's how the 3 houseboys were caught. Smiley was sentenced to 45 years for the murder and robbery of Bill. I'm not sure how much of that sentence he actually served, or if he's still incarcerated. It's been 38 years, which would put Smiley at 57 years old today. I kinda think he might be out. I also didn't have the last name of the other houseboys, so I'm not sure what their sentence was. It was probably less than Smiley's, because Smiley was the one that pulled the trigger. The following year, Bill's mansion of sexual deviance and death was put on the market. No one wanted it. A developer finally purchased it. He tore the mansion down, broke the property into 18 lots, and had 13 two-story single-family homes built on it. Some say that the land is haunted. Apparitions of young boys and an unknown creature roam the land, and shadowy figures have been seen. Strange sounds, feeling like you're being watched, and feelings of uneasiness are what some people have claimed they felt there. Our True Crime Quickie this episode comes to us from Mississippi. On Monday, October 11th, 2021, a black trans man drove himself to Merritt Health Hospital in Jackson, Mississippi. He got out of the car and collapsed. He had multiple bullet wounds and was rushed to the University of Mississippi Medical Center. And once there, he died on the emergency room operating table. The man was 25-year-old male Robert Groves. He was from Jackson, Mississippi, in spite of his car having Alabama license plates. Mel was studying plant science at Alcorn University, which is about an hour and a half away from his home in Jackson. Mel was getting ready to graduate with a degree. He was also a farmer and a plant soil scientist. His family and friends describe Mel as brilliant, a lover of animals and agriculture. He ran the TKO's community garden in Jackson. The TKO stands for the Knights, KNIGHTS, and Orchid Society. TKO is an organization by and for Black LGBTQ+ people. It's to help them obtain equality and justice through group economics, education, leadership development, and organizing cultural work to help build the power of Black LGBTQ+ people across southern states. The case is now a cold case. Police have nothing to go on, and no one's even sure if they're even investigating anymore. The police at the time weren't sure about the motive, or even if Mel was shot in Jackson, Mississippi. But the TKO of Jackson, Mississippi has been tirelessly working towards finding out what happened to Mel the day he was so callously shot and killed. The TKO has also said Mel shared with them he feared for his life being a trans man in a state where LGBTQ+ people can legally be refused services based on their identities. Media and law enforcement in this case have also been extremely disrespectful of Mel's identity. They've called Mel a woman, and they've repeatedly used Mel's dead name. Mel leaves behind his cat Boo Radley. Should you have any information regarding the murder of Mel Robert Groves, there's a reward being offered by the TKO in Alabama. You can call them at area code 334-603-1716, or you can call the Jackson, Mississippi Police Department at 601-960-1217. Rest in power, Mel. Love you, Rainbow Warriors. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, bi, trans, or live your truth, unless you're a murderer. Fuck you, Supreme Court. You can't take my rights away. You can't tell me what to do with my body. You can't tell other women what to do with their bodies. You all suck ass and you're setting us back to caveman days. How the fuck are we supposed to be proud to be an American when you idiots do shit like this?